And now we are going to have Jennifer Gimble, and everybody said everything all about her. She was a wonderful interim director. She got the Aspinall Award. I mean, I could go on and on. Everybody's already talked enough about Jennifer. So Jennifer, we're just going to give you the mic to talk about the Colorado River Compact.
Thank you, John. Good morning. I'm usually technologically challenged, so we'll hope this works. First of all, thank you, David, very much. David is also the chair of our external advisory group for the Water Center and has been for several years. We value his thought process. I want to thank all of you for being here, especially right up front. We'll have students and faculty coming in and out. That was the whole point of having this at the Laurie Center, was so that people, the students especially, and faculty can come in. I see some students from my grad 592 class. I see some former people from the Water Literate Leaders class that we do. And so I really appreciate you all attending. We are taping this whole session, and we will be able to put the link on our website so that if you miss pieces of this, you can go to the website and check it out. And David pretty much gave my presentation. I'm just going to go into some particulars, and we'll see how this goes. So, the Colorado River Basin, here it is, 7 states, 2 nations, 1,400 miles long, drains 250,000 square miles, provides water to 40 million people and 5.5 million acres of irrigated agriculture. It serves, the area served, has an economic value of $1.5 trillion annually. Also generates about 4,200 megawatts of clean power. I want to, is this a pointer? No, nope, not what I wanted to do. So I just wanted to point out a few features on this. You'll see as we come down, see the headwaters, the green, the Yampa, the white. Then we have the headwaters around Lake Granby area coming into the Colorado. It used to be called the Grand River, and then the legislature in Colorado said we need to identify this as the Colorado River, so that's what it became. Flows down Utah, New Mexico. Then you come to a little place called Lee Ferry that's just right on that line between Utah and Arizona. And Lee Ferry is the dividing point. It's right below Lake Powell. After Lee Ferry, you go through the Grand Canyon, and you come to Lake Mead. If you go down further, you come down to the border. There's an all-American canal that takes water out of the Colorado River and shifts it over to San Diego and Las Vegas. And then we go into Mexico. Colorado River used to drain into the Gulf of California, doesn't so much anymore. So I wanted to, just in case we have people here who aren't familiar with water talk, there are 2 concepts I wanted to make sure we define for you. The first one is an acre-foot of water. So the compact divides, as David said, between the 2 basins, 7.5 million acre-feet to each basin, upper and lower. If you take a football field and you put sides on it and you fill it with a foot of water, that is an acre-foot of water. That is about 325 to 26,000 gallons of water. A typical family uses about a half an acre-foot of water annually. So that gives you some context. The other definition is consumptive use of water. The Colorado River Compact divides the river between the upper and lower basin, each getting 7.5 million acre-feet of consumptive use. Consumptive use is not diversions. It's the amount of water that's evaporated, transpired, incorporated into products or crops, consumed by humans or livestock, or otherwise not available for immediate use. Consumptive use is evaporation off of reservoirs. Consumptive use is transit losses as water is being delivered to whatever headgate. So that's an important concept under our compact. So as David said, the compact is both federal law and state law in a contract. It divides between the Colorado River Compact, divides the upper basin and the lower basin, and there's Lee Ferry pointed out again. 7.5 million acre-feet of consumptive use. Now, in the lower basin, they get another 1 million acre-feet of consumptive use because of the Salt and Gila rivers that come out of New Mexico and Arizona. David talked about a delivery obligation, and that's sometimes a contentious term, delivery obligation among upper basin states, because what it really is the compact says the upper basin shall not deplete the flows to the lower basin in the amount of 75 million acre-feet over a 10-year period. It goes into Powell. Powell then delivers it to Meade. We shortcut that to saying it's a delivery. But I want you to understand that there are some nuances there. Now, you'll see that we have, in the upper basin, it includes a piece of Arizona. So they are in the northern eastern part of their state is in the upper basin. And New Mexico is a piece of the lower basin. We start talking about the basin states as what we really mean are the division states. So the division states for the upper basin are Wyoming, Colorado, Utah, New Mexico. For the lower basin, it's Arizona, California, and Nevada. But you're going to hear me just say the state, the lower basin states. And I'm really talking about the division states. I get that right? All right. I've got Attorney General here, Assistant Attorney General to help me. So, as David said, the compact protects present protected rights. So if you have a pre-compact right on the river, you have a good water right. It means you cannot be curtailed because of the compact. So the state engineer wouldn't curtail you if we had to get water down to Lee Ferry because you have a protected right. However, in Colorado, we're not quite sure how all that works. And we're hoping that eventually the state engineer in Colorado will help guide us as to how that might work. Now, the compact is approved by Congress, but it also has to be approved by the legislature in each of the 7 basin states. Well, true to history and form, Arizona said, nope, not going there. So we had a compact of 6 states. We had a Congress who said, yeah, we're all for this. And that's where we were. Also, another note in the compact, it says that none of its provisions shall affect the U.S. government's obligations to Indian tribes. There'll be more about that in a little bit. Now, when the compact was negotiated, the framers had a lot of science in front of them. And you're going to hear from Eric Kuhn later in the day talking about how he thinks the negotiators chose the wrong science to base their division on. But they thought, those folks thought, there was probably 18 or 19 million acre-feet a year in the compact. So there's lots of surplus water. So we didn't worry about Mexico. We knew we were going to have a treaty with Mexico. And we did in the 40s. Mexico gets 1.5 million acre-feet. Acknowledged the Indians, but did not do anything more than that. So in 1928, after 6 states had okayed the compact, Congress said, all right, Arizona, you haven't approved. Too bad. We, Congress, approve this compact based on 6 states' approval. So it was ratified, but at the same time, Congress divvied up the lower basin states' amount, and they are required to get contracts, as David talked about, with the secretary to get their water. So we have California with 4.4 million acre-feet, Arizona with 2.8 million acre-feet, and Nevada, 0.3 million acre-feet. Now, Nevada is probably thinking they got the worst deal of all. Las Vegas wasn't blooming yet at that point. And so they would probably be a winner if we did renegotiate the compact. But actually, as David again talked about, though, these divisions are based on actual supply. And the upper Colorado River states realize that we have a variable supply. And so they chose to divide the upper states into percentage of apportionments. You'll see that here, Wyoming 14, Colorado 51.75, Utah 23, and New Mexico 11.25. As David mentioned, they have a process to curtail use if they have to comply with the compact, and it established an Upper Basin Compact Commission. This commission is a representative appointed by the governor of each state, the 4 Upper Basin states, and a federal representative. Becky Mitchell is our compact commissioner for the Upper Basin states. We just have a new federal commissioner appointed who is also a Colorado person, and that is Ann Castle. So Hoover Dam, we have Hoover Dam and Glen Canyon Dam, the 2 largest dams in the United States. In 1928, the Boulder Canyon Project Act authorized the building of Hoover Dam, which then leads us to Lake Mead and also the All-American Canal. In 1956, Congress authorized the Colorado River Storage Protection Act, which included the building of Glen Canyon Dam, which gives us Lake Powell, and several other storage units in the Upper Basin. And these will look familiar to you. We have Flaming Gorge at the Utah-Wyoming border. We have what we call the Curry-Conte unit, which is Blue Mesa Dam, Morrow Point, and Crystal Dam here in Colorado. Beautiful dams, by the way, if you haven't ever seen them. Glen Canyon Dam, then at the end of the river, and Navajo Dam. I have to get on my tippy toes to see okay. And the Navajo Dam. We're going to come back to these because these play a role as we were dealing with drought. One other project I wanted to make you aware of is the Central Arizona Project, which was approved by the Colorado River Basin Project Act of 1968. Arizona finally approved the compact in the late 40s. And they approved the compact because they were told by Congress, if you want this huge Central Arizona project through Arizona, you gotta sign on to the compact. And so they did. But California, now this is all playing out in the Congress. California, of course, who has more representatives than anybody, said, but there's one condition. You have to be junior to California's 4.4. So Arizona, your 2.8 is now junior to California's 4.4. That is being fought between California and Arizona as we speak with issues of the drought. The Central Arizona project is 336-mile-long canal. It delivers water to Maricopa, Pinal, Pima County, serves 5 million people, which is about 80% of the population, delivers water to large irrigation districts and to Native American tribes. The other thing that the Colorado River Basin Project Act did was it required the secretary to do an annual report of consumptive uses and losses for each state. So that's how the states keep track of, are they within their compact entitlement? This is, back to the tribes. There are 30 recognized federal tribes on the river. Under what's called the Indian Reserved Water Rights Doctrine, or the Winters Doctrine, a case that came out in the early 1900s where the Supreme Court said when the United States sets aside water for the tribes, they get enough water for their homeland, to establish their homeland. And they have a priority right, which is the date of the reservation. And that's how we work them into our state systems. The Supreme Court in the 60s, in a case called Arizona v. California, told the states that if you have a tribe in your state, the consumptive uses by that tribe are charged to your particular state. We in here in Colorado have 2 tribes. They're right along the, right near Durango on the southwestern edge of Colorado. It's the Ute, Mountain Ute, and the Ute, Southern Ute. On the river, 22 tribes have adjudicated rights to water of 3.2 million acre-feet a year. 3.2. Right now, that's about 30% of the water that runs in the river. There are 18 in the lower basin, and there are 4 in the upper basin. 12 tribes have not yet resolved their water rights claims, but they could claim up to 2.8 million acre-feet of water. That is one issue that remains in question with respect to the river, and now especially that we have a drought going on. Speaking of, from drought to aridification, the the slide on the right is Lake Powell. Look at the bathtub rings at Lake Powell. Lake Powell is 24% full right now. Meade is 28% full. Hopefully, you're going to hear more today in other panels about what the drought has done to the water supply and to the reservoirs. And Brad will explain why it's not a drought anymore, but it is aridification. So here's just a couple slides I thought would be interesting to show you. Recall that I said when they were negotiating the compact, they thought they had well over 15 million acre-feet. They really were looking at 18 or 19 million acre-feet. And you can see this total estimated natural flow, 1905 to 1930. That's about what water was in the river. But then as we go on through the rest of the years, we're looking at maybe about 15 until 2015. But then look down to the other graph. You'll see the observed flows have been less, actually, than the 15. And what do we have? About 9. Oh, I have another chart here. 9.6 million acre feet available now from 1991 to 2020. Compact was based on 15 million, at least 15 million acre feet being in the river. Now we're down to 9.6 million acre feet. So, as David explained, the lower basin states sit pretty. They have this huge reservoir, Meade, above them. They have contracts with the government. They call for water. They get water. However, the lower basin has been consistently overusing. And that overuse is because of the fact that they were not charged evaporation and seepage and transit losses. That was the point David was making. If they were charged that 1.2 million acre feet a year over the last 40 years, Lake Powell would be sitting a little bit better than it is now. But they weren't. I think that's going to get fixed in this next round of negotiations. It's 2001. Actually, in 2001, the Secretary signed a surplus document as to how to share surplus in the Colorado River. Mother Nature said, I'll show you who's boss, crashed the system, and you can see how bad the flow's again. We've had a few good years, but they're pretty drastically low at this point. And you're going to hear more about how, even though we have a good snowpack up here in the high country, because of the drought and because of aridification, we don't get as much runoff. A lot of it just goes into soil moisture. So it's an interesting setup. All right, 2001, crash. 2002, 3, 4, 5, crash. The Secretary looks at the states and says, the way we're operating the river does not work. We have to find another way. What can we do? In 18 months, a record for 7 states, they got a plan together. And that plan is turned into the 2007 interim guidelines. That plan set up tiers where if there was a certain level in reservoirs, usually Lake Meade, if Lake Meade got down to a certain level, then the lower basin states had to take shortages. They were delivered less water than that 7.5 million acre feet. They created a water bank. Sometimes you'll hear that as intentionally created surplus. They coordinated the operations of Lakes Powell and Meade. And it expires in 2026. So before the crisis of the last couple of years, everyone was headed towards, are the guidelines working? What can we do to improve them? And we all have to come up with a new plan in 2026. Well, Mother Nature continued to challenge us. And so the states again were asked to come up with a plan to assist in keeping the system sustainable. The lower basin drought contingency plan took increased shortages. They gave more incentives to bank water in Lake Meade. and for the first time recognize that the lower basin has an overuse. The upper basin put together plans, drought response operations agreements, demand management, storage agreement, and weather modification. You may recall that a few years ago, Becky Mitchell and Colorado Water Conservation Board started conversations on demand management in Colorado. And the idea was, can we find enough water under a demand management system? We're talking mostly agriculture, as David said, they use the most water. Can they fallow land? We pay them for that. Will that help us keep water in the system? Can they shorten their growing season? Can they change their crops? So there are a lot of possibilities discussed, and hopefully you'll hear more about that. Weather modification we've been doing for decades. In fact, Southern Nevada Water Authority and Metropolitan Water from California pay people here in the upper basin to produce more snow. And so we do have weather modification equipment out, and it has proven to be somewhat effective. Not as much water as we'd like, but it's there. All of these drought contingency plans expire in 2026. And again, last year was crazy and sad, and the lower basin came up with something they call the 500 plus plan, where they wanted to keep at least 500,000 acre feet, or put 500,000 acre feet in Lake Mead. Also, I can't give this talk without talking about the wonderful relationship we have with Mexico. I was fortunate enough to be involved in the negotiations for Minute 319. Mexico, too, was concerned about how the river was running and the sustainability of the river. And so we were able to come to an agreement between Mexico and the United States, where Mexico shares in the shortages. Actually, the United States had to agree to share the surpluses, but that's not an issue so far. But we also jointly worked on some international environmental projects. One you heard of flows, a pulse flow, where we sent enough water down the Colorado River that it met the Gulf of Mexico. Great experiment, showed we could do it, reinvigorated the environment in Mexico, and was quite the thing. These minutes expire in 2026. So we have a stressed system. Lower basin overuse is an example. The average outflow at Lake Mead, that's deliveries, was 9.6 million acre feet, but 10 million acre feet in 2021, during the drought years, and 9.9 in 2022. As you can see, the system needs a better balance. Upper basin uses an average of about 4.5 million acre feet. As Dave said, last year, I think it was last year, we used 3.5 million acre feet. Not because we were saving water, because that's all the water there was. And that's what we could use under our appropriation system. Reclamation became very concerned about structural issues at Glen Canyon Dam. At a certain level, they can't produce power. They deliver water to 2 municipalities in the area. They would not be able to get them water. And so they were a little worried. And here's the chart that they have been using to explain this. If you look at Glen Canyon Dam, you see 2 pools there, the power pool and the dead pool. If we reach the power pool, we can no longer generate power. That power is low-cost power that mostly goes to the indigenous populations in the basin. If we get to the dead pool, no water at all comes out of the reservoir. We cannot get it out. And so there are engineering structural stresses that reclamation is looking at with respect to Lake Powell. So when you'll hear in the news, you know, the power pool, the dead pool, that's what we're talking about. So one of the things we've done here in the Upper Basin, or actually the Secretary made us do, is drought operation releases out of those 4 reservoirs I talked about. We took out, remember reading in the headlines a couple years, or I think it was last year, Blue Mesa drained, marinas were out of the water. There were 141,000 acre feet that came out of Blue Mesa and Flaming Gorge last year. This year, there's been 500,000 acre feet that comes from Flaming Gorge. All those are sent down to Powell to build up the system in the pools. Unfortunately, once it gets to Powell, under the way the river operates, a bunch of that goes on down to Lake Mead. We anticipate that the federal government will again ask us to dump another 500,000 acre feet of Flaming Gorge water next year. And then that's pretty much it. Those reservoirs are done. So those are Band-Aids trying to keep up the levels in the two reservoirs. This June, Department of the Interior announced that the state must reduce its use by 2.4 million acre feet. And they need to do it within a year. This is a picture of Camille Touton. She is the Reclamation Commissioner. She gave the states 2 months to figure it out. Well, oh, and besides that, then here's where the Secretary declared shortages in the lower basin. In 2002, Arizona, Nevada, and Mexico saw cuts of 613,000 acre feet. And then this year, or next year, there'll be deeper cuts of 721,000 acre feet. There's probably going to be more. So she asked the states to come up with a plan. The Upper Basin put a plan together. They call it their 5-point plan. And that plan is basically developing, talked about interstate and intrastate demand management plans, reauthorizing a system conservation program, investing in monitoring and reporting, encouraging strict water management, and the development of a 2023 drought response operation plan. The lower basin, nothing. Arizona and California continue to fight it out as to how best to move forward. Well, I'm sure you've heard the adage, water runs uphill to money. Congress has supplied some money, a lot, in the infrastructure bill and also in the IRA. Help me. Yeah, Inflation Reduction Act, thank you. Specifically in the Inflation Reduction Act, $4 billion of drought relief to the western states with a priority to the Colorado River system. We saw in August some municipalities in the basin, Aurora, Colorado Springs, Denver, Pueblo, Southeastern Water Conservancy District, Southern Nevada Water Authority put out a letter basically saying, we will conserve more. we will do our part as the river continues to be depleted. Jim Lockett, I'm sure, will talk a lot about that, so I'm going to not go there. Then I was in Santa Fe last week, and the secretary and deputy secretary and commissioner announced that there's more that they're doing. They are considering to even reduce more of the flows out of Powell beyond what they already have announced, that they probably will take more water from the 4 major upper basin reservoirs. They're going to account and allocate evaporation, seepage, and losses to the lower basin. That's very controversial, and that'll probably spark a lawsuit. And again, they're looking to the states to decrease their water use. So that's where we are. You're going to hear panels about how we got here, a little bit about the compact and the history behind the compact. You're going to hear a panel on what CSU folks have been doing, what kind of studies they've had, trying to help inform the conversations here in Colorado and along the river. Then we're going to have a panel looking at what's happening now, how you can relate to it, and another panel on the future. So I want to thank you all so much for being here, and please stay. This will be an interesting day.